this morning, the New York Times obtaining a disturbing and extremely violent video shown at a conference by a pro-Trump group at President Trump's Miami Golf Resort last week. That shows a fake President Trump's head edited on the body of a man opening fire in a, quote, church of fake news, assaulting and stabbing critics in the media. Now, according to the Times, the clip ends with Trump driving a stake into the head of a person who has the CNN logo for a face before standing and smiling as he looks around. The clip appears to be edited from a church massacre scene in the 2014 movie Kingsman: The Secret Service. A spokesman for President Trump's re-election campaign told the Times he did not know anything about the video, and the video was not produced by the campaign. The campaign does not condone violence. CNN is calling on the president to denounce the video in the strongest possible terms.
All right, so joining us now, Maggie Haberman, CNN political analyst and White House correspondent for the New York Times. She broke this story about the tape. Maggie, good morning.
Good morning.
So why was this sickening video that we're not playing for our viewers because it's just actually too violent? Why was this shown at the president's Doral Resort?
So according to an organizer of the conference, Allison, it was shown as part of a quote-unquote meme exhibit. It was shown in one room of the conference, it appears. It does not appear as if the people who spoke at the conference, the major figures who were associated with the president's campaign, had seen it. But it was shown on some loop to people walking in and out of a room. This is obviously an event that was held at the president's resort. It was the organizers say that they didn't pick the meme, they didn't have control over the content, and this matter is under review, or at least that's what they said yesterday.
Maggie, we've seen Cesar Soyak, the pipe bomber, have a legal defense saying the president's statements are what inspired him to attempt violence. What does this video and the fact it's shown at a pro-Trump rally at the president's golf resort say to you about the environment that appears to be set or condoned tacitly or implicitly by the president and his campaign?
What it says at minimum is just that there's a lack of responsibility being taken for the kind of violence and violent imagery on the internet that some of the president's language is inciting. They obviously, as far as we've no reason to believe that anybody knew anything about this video, as they say, but there is a trickle-down effect on culture from language, and we have seen the president repeatedly saying, well, I had nothing to do with that. But this is why denouncing things matters so much. It sends a message to supporters.
This video, just to make everybody aware of what it is, it depicts an illustration, basically, of President Trump going into a church and opening fire and conducting a mass shooting in a church against the press, specific entities of the press, as well as some other of his political rivals or politicians. Do you have a sense, Maggie, from your reporting of what people thought when they saw this video at this resort?
Some people, we obviously can't speak for every person who saw it and how they responded, but we do know that some people were troubled by it and were surprised at how graphic in nature it was. Allison, we also noted in the story that the president in 2017 tweeted not similar in the sense it was nowhere near as violent, but he tweeted a meme where there was it was the president knocking out a person with a CNN logo over their head. And the president, that tweet went viral. So it's worth remembering that this is at least the genre of content that the president in the past has endorsed on his Twitter feed.
I have a new statement here from the group that organized this event, this political event at the president's Doral Resort a couple of days ago. So here's what they've just said, Maggie. It has come to our attention that an unauthorized video was shown in a side room at AmpFest 19. That's the name of this conference. The video was not approved, seen, or sanctioned by the conference organizers. The organizers of AmpFest 19 were not even aware of the video until they were contacted by the New York Times. The first time anyone officially associated with the conference was made aware of the video was when the New York Times requested comment. We find it shocking that the New York Times would not report on any of the sanctioned events in the article, including our panel conversation literally condemning political violence while claiming to be upset over a meme that was not sanctioned, shown on stage, or approved AmpFest 19 always has and always will condemn political violence, and proof of this was our major panel discussion on this very topic. Maggie, your response, and how is it possible that none of the organizers knew that this was being shown in a room, clearly on a monitor that had been set up somehow?
Right. It's an odd response for something that was aired at a conference that they put on. It's also sort of an odd response given that they said something totally different yesterday. And this was a conference where the organizers did not make it fully open press. It was not, as if credentials were easily handed out. They have to answer for their own response, but it was their conference. The video showed at their conference.
Maggie, thank you very much for all of your reporting and all of the information this morning. We'll talk to you soon. All right, joining us now, we have Bianca Golodryga, CNN Senior Global Affairs Analyst, and Margaret Talev, Politics and White House Editor for Axios, and the former president of the White House Correspondents Association. And in that vein, Margaret, I want to ask you about this video. I'll read to you what the current president, Jonathan Karl, of the White House Correspondents Association said. The White House Correspondents Association is horrified by a video reportedly shown over the weekend at a political conference organized by the president's supporters at the Trump National Doral in Miami. All Americans should condemn this depiction of violence directed towards journalists and the president's political opponents. We have previously told the president his rhetoric could incite violence. Now we call on him and everybody associated with this conference to denounce this video and affirm that violence has no place in our society. Your thoughts, Margaret?
Yeah, I think Jon Karl spoke very well for the organization and for all journalists, not just the ones who cover the White House. And, it's a terrifying and deeply disturbing video. And it goes to the heart of something that all journalists have been very concerned about over the last couple of years, which is that, it only takes one misguided person who hears the president's critiques about him seeing the press as not just an enemy of himself, which the press is not. The press is just here to cover the news, or as an enemy of the public, which is a shocking comment, and that someone would misunderstand that and be motivated to act in a violent way. So there have been longstanding concerns about this, and this taps into it. But I also want to say it just sort of comes at a time when the nation is galvanized, at least before the impeachment discussion, over a debate on gun violence. It comes as yet again a police officer has killed a person of color in their home, and and it comes in the wake of an array of mass shootings across this country that have got a lot of Americans really upset and worried about what to do. So there is a broader context outside of just journalists that this touches on the heart of, but it is a real concern for working journalists that somebody could misunderstand colorful and inappropriate attacks on the role of the press in this country and be driven to act. And it's something that I'm really concerned about also.
And Bianca, one of the things in this disturbing video is that the president is depicted as attacking not just the press in a church, but also his political critics and political opponents, including Republicans, including the late John McCain. What does that say to you about sort of the worldview of some of these folks in terms of President Trump and what they apparently cheer in some parody fashion?
Well, it makes me wonder why the Secret Service is not involved in this, if they haven't been and if they're not already. It is so disturbing to watch this video. I think it shows that it speaks to any of the so-called enemies that this president has amassed. And we know that they typically don't fall into just one party line. They cross parties. The video is so long that the organizer's statement and their argument that we didn't know anything about this until it was played. Once you start seeing 10 seconds of this video, someone had the opportunity to cut it off, right? This video goes on and on and on. It is so unbelievably gruesome. And to go back to an earlier point made about the state of journalism in this country as a whole, the fact that their statement suggests that the New York Times didn't focus on the certain aspects of this conference, it's sort of blaming the New York Times for not focusing on a panel they had against violence, tells you where we are in the country when it comes to the relationship Americans have with journalism.
One more thing, Margaret, I just have to, I think that the White House Correspondents Association statement is great, but I think that they miss the mark in this one phrase. We've previously told the president his rhetoric could incite violence. We've already seen it, Margaret. Already, the Tree of Life synagogue shooter said that he liked the rhetoric that the president was using about immigrants and what was happening at the border. Cesar Sayoc, who sent bombs to CNN, had his van with President Trump and language that's been used and bullseyes on certain people. It's already happening. And so, yeah. I could go on. The El Paso shooter cites some of the same language. It's happening. This is not a sort of random fear that we have going forward. It's already happening. And I just want to say one more thing about CNN that CNN has put out about this video, because CNN is targeted in the video. Here's what the CNN statement is. Sadly, this is not the first time that supporters of the president have promoted violence against the media in a video they apparently find entertaining. But it is by far and away the worst. The images depicted are vile and horrific. The president and his family, the White House, and the Trump campaign need to denounce it immediately in the strongest possible terms. Anything less equates to a tacit endorsement of violence and should not be tolerated by anyone. Your final thoughts on this, Margaret?
Well, my final thought is that I'm concerned as we go into what is going to be at least a months-long season over this impeachment inquiry, that, again, anyone who doesn't understand the way the news business works will wrongly interpret the work of journalists. And I just want to make clear to people that journalists are Americans. Journalists' job is to try to tell the news in an impartial way. And sometimes that is critical of a president of either party. And that should not be a call to incite anyone to violence. And this is just a very concerning development.
And if I could just quickly say, the president's silence right now seems to, in effect, justify some of this reaction. There was a video picture circulating over the internet over the weekend about some man getting on an airplane wearing a shirt suggesting that journalists should be hung. The fact that this is becoming an everyday kind of phenomenon where people are talking about journalists in such a way, we have it much better off than many other journalists around the world. I'm not going to deny that. That having been said, a lot of this could have been prevented. And it's the same thing we've seen with the president not wanting to denounce David Duke, not wanting to denounce some of the organizers in Charlottesville. It's a repeated pattern we're seeing from the president. It's escalating. And the best thing that this administration could do last night was denounce videos like this.
And just to Margaret's point, I think that you're so right that there are some people who don't understand that one of journalists' roles is watchdog of government. That's what we're tasked with. That's in our mission statement. Watchdog of government, not lapdog. Watchdog of government. And, sometimes I think that the president's supporters don't completely understand that. Thank you both, Bianna.